Hi there, it's good to be with you. Thank you for sending your questions. I will be going through the 5 questions and 2 of the interesting bonus questions as well. I hope that is a great way to start. What research question do you ask in your research? And why has it received scientific attention? What are the grander issues that the field is grappling with, and how does this research question fit in? What would we know if we had the answer to this question? In my career, I've had several research questions, but I think they all are similar in nature. When it came to people who research and describe sign language, I always felt it was important to ask, how can we show the principles, organization, structure, and importance of sign language? I often see movies or TV shows where there may be a person signing on the screen. Oftentimes they are signing, but there's never captioning or details as to what they're saying. I always thought if people could understand the language and what's said, they would get a depth of understanding that they might not have had. So, in my career, I try to choose what I think are the difficult questions with regard to sign language. My dissertation was the first large and ambitious project of mine. I was working with my advisor and we decided to try and answer basic questions. I completed and published my dissertation in the year 1983. We discussed how do we know the sentence's clues, subject and objects, and all the different parts. That's widely accepted with spoken languages, but with sign language, it seems to have them as well. How does one know and argue that a part of ASL is the subject? So, I created a test which was called subject pronoun copy. A sample sentence would be like, I graduated from Georgetown University. The copied sign is always the subject, never the object. I bought the car. In this example, you don't copy the I, the object, only the subject. I bought a car yesterday. Am I meeting you at 2? I'm unsure. It's a very soft copy of I that's used as a subject. So, I developed new and different ways to recognize the subjects in ASL. What became a project at the time was how to describe and write the grammar of the major signed language of the world, which was ASL. I've done different projects throughout my career. I started with reading. I wanted to understand people who grew up not hearing spoken English, if they could still read and write, figuring out the relationship between signing and the ability to read. Since then, a lot of people are now doing this research. I would say about 20 years ago, I was invited to work with a group of people from Israel. I thought it was a wonderful idea. I had never touched the Middle East. I've been to Europe and Asia but never that part of the world. So, I was excited to go and work with Israeli Sign Language, ISL. I would compare it to ASL. ISL was actually created recently, from deaf people from countries within Europe and Africa. They all came together and it led to the formation of ISL. ASL had that, but it was long ago. ASL might be 250, 300 years old, whereas ISL is a more recent sign language. So, as time progressed when I was there, my colleagues suggested the four of us visit the Bedouin village in the Negev. I thought to myself, okay. I found out it was an area where Arabs lived depending on the tribe. They said there was one group that had many deaf people there. This was interesting to me, I thought. If there are many deaf people, there may be a new sign language. I envisioned it to be more mime-like or performative. This motivated me and I was eager to visit. After the 3-hour drive, we went to some people's houses, saw some deaf people talking amongst each other, and it wasn't what I expected. They signed very fast, and I couldn't understand anything. It was a bit odd to me because oftentimes, I am able to detect a little bit of the signs I see. Not everything 100%, but enough to understand a bit. It was interesting seeing this Middle Eastern sign language. There was no finger spelling. They signed very fast but soft. There was no overt acting or gesturing as if it were home signs. All four of us were very interested and thought we should work on this. Ever since then, I began working with Al-Said Bedouin Sign Language. That research question shifted to what were the differences in sign languages across the world. It dawned on me as we were working that my original ideas that ASL had the same features as other sign languages, such as the use of space and other properties. Well, Al-Said Bedouin Sign Language did not have everything and consisted of some things that ASL doesn't have as well. That made me realize my work went from a major SIG language that over 3, 4, 500,000 people use to a small language where maybe 300 to 400 people use it daily, including deaf people and their family members who all sign in that community. So, from very large to very small. My work moving forward is really trying to understand the differences of sign languages across the world. And what are the underlying factors that allow for sign languages to vary in interesting ways? That is a motivation question that drives me.
I have 2 questions for you. What is the state of the art, and how is your research novel? When I started doing work in 1978 and the 80s, most of my work was focused on ASL European Sign Languages. Some Asian, like Japanese, sign languages. Now my work has been about many languages all over the world. Thus, making the work greater and richer in the portrait of language within that modality. I believe my work is novel in 3 ways. I understand the value of studying much more now than I started studying. Different languages in different communities and situations. ASL is a natural sign language with many users. If we're talking about primary users, then 4 to 500,000 counting hearing people too, interpreters, codas who may sign. It's such a huge community of users. Compare that with the sign language used in a specific village by deaf and hearing people interacting with each other. Both languages have important cultural, social differences that affect their languages. I felt that when doing work on sign languages, it's very important to see the differences between them. Also, I'm starting to do work on iconicity. I've been publishing some work I call patterned iconicity, which means I'm looking at one sign, for instance, girl. We look to see what's iconic about it. The story is that it derived from bonnets they used to wear. Is it true or not? I don't know, but that's the story behind the sign. Or boy, the sign derives from caps. Most people think about these icons of specific signs. I'm more interested in patterns, more interested in iconicity linked with grammar. As I look at different languages, I see different kinds of iconicity. Iconicity that's tied to the structure of that system or language. So, recently I ran into people who worked in Australia, New Zealand, and in Papua New Guinea. They all explained to me their sign languages in different contexts than what we are used to seeing in Europe, America, even South America. It was unusual. For instance, in Central Australia, the Aboriginals would practice what is called speech taboo, where they do not speak for whatever reason. If a woman were to become a widow, in some communities, they are expected to stop speaking for a year as a way to mourn the loss of the husband. Or they have a kinship, what's called poison cousins, which means they aren't actual cousins. It's a bit complex, but it's where poison cousins aren't supposed to speak. So in the cases of these speech taboos, the hearing Aboriginals actually sign. So, I started to study their signs and iconicity. It was quite interesting and different from what I expected. It helped me see the relationship between structure, meaning, and form in that sign language. What method or methods do you use, and why are they relevant for your research? What can we learn from these that other methods may not answer? What methods do I use? Well, I have published some experimental methods when I worked with others. From what I started with to now, I do a lot of descriptions and categories, in addition to experimental work. For instance, for patterned iconicity work, I have done solicitations asking people their signs for 100 words. I noticed people would do the same patterns for the same group. In ASL, when talking about food, it's often described by its shape, or how you handle the food, such as the sign for tomato. It's cutting the item. That's for food. But if you're talking about tools, you usually show the action of the tool and not only the shape. If it's including the shape, then it needs an action to go with it, such as screwdriver, hammer, handsaw, knife, spoon, fork. They all must be shape and action. Whereas with animals, the body is used, sometimes with a shape, but often the body is used. For instance, elephant refers to the function of the elephant's head and trunk. Giraffe is also used to show its neck. Monkey shows the hands, and as if the body was animate, it wouldn't work the other way around. You couldn't use your body to describe tools. You wouldn't use your body to describe a hammer. You would use it to describe how to use it, but not what a hammer looks like. Whereas with animals, you are describing what they look like. It's a map on your body. That's what I call patterned iconicity. Describe one or two of your most relevant research experiments. Questions, hypotheses, methods, results. What do we now know? What questions does this work answer? What new frontiers do these findings raise? Identify some key next steps that these research findings raise. I like to use descriptions and matching. I recently gave some examples previously of some different experiments and questions. As for the next steps, I'm more interested in doing experimental work. So, I am doing a joint project with a collective from Scotland who study artificial languages, what they call toy languages. That means languages created specifically for experimental purposes. These small languages are toy languages or artificial languages. I would like to create a toy or artificial sign language for experiments only, then see how people understand or analyze this artificial language. What are the translational implications of your work? And how does this work contribute to the betterment of society and humankind? One example of the transforming of a research question I've recently asked was about modality. It seemed to me to understand the first part of my research work, we often look to visual, manual languages and compare it to spoken and auditory languages. They are different modalities. It's like they are separated but equal. I'm now more interested in what is called bimodality, which means humans, or multimodal humans encompass all modalities. Say someone is born, whatever modality, albeit spoken or signed, the person will pick parts of each to combine to create one language. So, if you were born in Central Australia, you would speak or sign with hearing people. If you are born in the US, you generally wouldn't sign with hearing people, gesture maybe, but not sign. There would be no reason to. They may say, "Oh, I'm not deaf." Hearing Australians aren't deaf but they sign. Our beliefs about speech, we go from one modality to other modalities. Some people grew up with speech, some grew up with signing. The discussions now are which modality more basic. It appears that spoken languages are more basic because there is no society where hearing people are raised not needing to speak and only signing. So, it's clear spoken languages are more basic. I don't care much about the which was first, spoken languages, or signed languages arguments. I am much more interested in seeing the differences among societies and groups of people and how they choose their language properties. Some languages include tones, including Chinese, some have clicks, like in South Africa, both of which English does not incorporate. So, we know many different ways to speak or sign. Multimodality is fundamental to human communication. That leads me to believe that all people can sign. Not just deaf people, all of us. All of us have multiple modalities. However, our culture encourages us to choose modalities from a small set. That's a different way of looking at humans. How did you go into science? When? What age? How did you discover your passion to spend a life in science? I decided when I was 17 that I wanted to pursue linguistics. My mother, Agnes Padden, taught at Gallaudet for many years. She taught English Lit, and I always wanted to do something with language, but not teach literature. I liked the concepts of grammar, English, and all. So, I wanted to do something like that. When someone brought up linguistics, it was that moment I wanted to pursue it. I was 17 and never changed since then. Was there any other thing that you wanted to do with your life? Or, was there any other area of science that you wanted to do? I believe that whatever you choose to do in the future, you must love and truly want to do it. Because it's a lot of work to set up experiments, write, get people together, look, explore, and more. If you don't love the topic at hand, it'll be hard for you to invest your time and sacrifice. In this field, there are some struggles, where you may hit a wall or not understand something before you finally get a breakthrough. You must love it, otherwise, it'll never work. Thank you all very much. I look forward to meeting and talking with you all. Bye bye.